In this video, I'm going to talk about something called economic value added, otherwise abbreviated as EVA. So, EVA is a variation of profit. So, the first thing you might be thinking is, well, why do we need a variation of profit? What's wrong with profit as a measure? So, profit is nice, but the thing is that profit does not take into consideration there's a cost to capital. So when someone gives you money, they expect a return. So cost to capital, this is not measured by profit. So what we want to do is ideally we'd like to measure investments or return in comparison to the cost that it is for the capital to generate that return. So now that sounds kind of complex, but let's just write this out. Let's put some numbers to it and get the formula out, and we'll think about it. So the economic value added, EVA, is equal to the return, which we'll call NOPAT, net operating profit after taxes, minus, so after accounting for, the invested capital, which will be total assets minus current liabilities, times WACC, the weighted average cost of capital. So what we're doing here is this. It's a long equation, but bear with me. So here's our cost of capital. So let's say this is 10%. I'm going to put some numbers to this in a moment. So here's our invested capital. This is we can think of it as the invested capital, the capital that is tied up. Investors expect a return. They gave us this money. They expect it. Now they could do something else with that investment. Maybe they could go and get 10% on bonds or on stocks or something, but they gave it to us, and so there's a cost to that. That capital is not free. So this cost times the invested capital, and then we take the difference with the return. So it'll be easier when we put some numbers to it. So we say, okay, what is the EVA? Well, we're going to need to know these things up here. So let's assume that the return, expected return, our NOPAT is $2,000. And the total assets, we've got 10,000, and then current liabilities, we'll say 4,000, and then we'll assume that our weighted average cost of capital is 10%. Now, given these things, we can go ahead and calculate the economic value that is being added, because we want to ensure that when we're making investments, that the return exceeds the cost of capital on the money that we have invested in our business. So let's go down here and let's actually calculate this out. So now the EVA is going to be equal to this return, so this 2,000, minus this 10,000 minus the 4,000 in current liabilities. So 10,000 minus 4,000 times the weighted average cost of capital, which is 10%. I'm just getting these numbers from over here, just plugging in. So now when we take this here, we got the 2,000 minus, this is 6,000 times 10% is 600. So that tells us that the economic value that we've added is 1,400, right? So our profit, while that's a good and useful measure, when we just look at, like, for example, our NOPAT, well, we made $2,000. Well, yes, but also that money that's tied up in the business from investors, they expect a return on that. There's a cost to that capital. Money is not free. And we're just taking that into consideration and saying, okay, does this investment, does it exceed the cost of that capital? And if so, by how much? So that's how this is economic value added, and how in some ways it's a superior measure to looking just at profit.